very suicidal, possibly would have committed suicide if my brother hadn't already done it.
Guys, this was going to be a really fun episode, so I'm bringing on Chad Kneller, and he's going to be talking a lot about growing up in the rock and roll lifestyle, literally, on stage singing in bands, going through his brother's suicide, to failed marriages and finding the woman of his dreams and the lifestyle they went together, his time through the Army, the experiences that led him on to his choice. And he gives some really, really, really great advice on how you can find it within yourself. So really take some time. Hope you enjoy this episode, guys. Keep running. Hey, got something really cool I wanted to run by and let you know what's going on. So I'm starting a group that will start taking a deep dive into each one of these episodes. So we'll collectively come together and talk about the shows, talk about the guest. I'll be bringing back some of the guests to do some Q&A sessions and really take a further dive into their story, their journey, the episode, talk about, maybe some of the things you wish I would have asked on the episodes, do some Q&A sessions and the like. As a friend put it to me, it's really like a book club, but for the podcast. So a couple times a week, we'll go in, we'll break down the favorite shows of the week, and have cool discussions around everything that we've heard, we've learned, and want to know about their journey. Some of these guests will come in and they'll teach part of, what makes them awesome at what they do. And then, as always, I'll be providing regular value and content in this group. It's really cool because this only is going to cost $5 a month to join this group. And you'll be able to come in, interact with everybody else in there. So I'll put a link right in the show notes for this that you can jump in, come have a conversation with us, and we will really deep dive into each one of these episodes and help us all rise up together. Thanks for tuning in, guys. It's going to be a great show today. Having the show wasn't something I started out to do, but the day I found out somebody wanted to really sponsor the show was a really, really cool experience. So guys, I want you to take some time to go check out Point Blank Safety Services and their new nonprofit, Blue Family Fund. These guys are doing some really, really cool things. And Stacy McGovern, who's the CEO over there, has been a dear friend, and she was a guest on the show. But these guys are literally taking, the off-duty officers and putting them out in security guard role. And here's what's cool about it is, as they're protecting our lives, they don't make a whole lot of money in that regard. No first responders are paid for the value they provide for our safety and our health and taking care of us. So these guys, Stacy and her team over at Point Blank Safety Services have really found a cool way to give back to these officers by helping them provide an additional income so they can continue to support and protect us. So do me a favor, guys. Seriously, go check out pointblanksafety.com and then go look at their nonprofit, which is Blue Family Fund. Now, this nonprofit was created because of the success of Point Blank Safety Services. They wanted to give back to the families of fallen officers and be able to give scholarships away to the families of current, police officers. So do me a favor. It would mean the world to me if you would go out and help support this show by supporting Point Blank Safety Services and their nonprofit Blue Family Fund. Just tell them Donnie has sent you. You heard it on Donnie's Success Champions, and Stacy will take a tremendous and amazing care of you. Thanks, guys. All right, guys. It's going to be a good day. I'm bringing you Chad Kneller, and I had to ask him how to pronounce his last name because I would damn sure said Kneller, because who pronounces the K when it's in like that in the last name? But this dude's got a badass story. I'm going to let him share it, let him tell you all about it. So, Chad, welcome to the show, brother, man. Tell us a little bit about your story. Tell us your journey, man.
Awesome. So, originally grew up in Illinois and born in 1973, so I'm actually getting ready to turn 45 here in a few days. Almost half a century old, right? So,
shit, dude, you're old. You got me by 4 years, so.
Yeah, I'm 4 years wiser than you. That's good stuff. So, I was kind of like your typical person, probably just went through school and didn't really think much about what I wanted to do with my life. And there was an Army recruiter standing outside one day, and I said, I don't know what I want to do, so I might as well join the military for a few years, and so they can pay for my college. That sounded like a good idea at the time. So joined up in the military and decided to become a 13 Bravo Cannon crew member. I had no idea really what that meant other than I was going to get to blow some stuff up. Sounded like fun to me, right? So went into the military for 3 years, got out, still really didn't know what I wanted to do, so I thought I'd try and become a acting major. Well, I went to college to do that, and I started singing in rock and roll bands, and this was in like 94. And I figured out real quick that I loved the rock and roll lifestyle. That's not the early 90s is kind of like when the Seattle sound was kicking off for all of you that are around my age. Nirvana and Pearl Jam and all those guys were kind of starting to become popular. And so that's the life that I decided that I wanted to live. So I went all in. I just dug into that life and embraced it fully, the partying and all that stuff. In 1999, I was with a band. We put out a CD, and we were really popular in the local area and had our stuff played on the radio, and it was just really, really exciting times. And at the same time, it was becoming a very dark time just from all the drugs I'd gotten into. It led to problems with the law, all that kind of stuff. And basically, I met a woman, and we decided to get married, and it was a train wreck. We thought we'd try the Tommy Lee, Pamela Anderson thing. I would sing in bands, and she would be a stripper.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Great combination.
Yeah. That didn't go very well, though.
That just screams like it's your own personal fairyland success story. I'm in a rock band. You're a stripper. Let's, fall in love and have our fairy tale, wedding life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was funny. We actually got married on April Fool's Day. So who were we fooling, right?
Yourselves, but.
Yeah, so it was at the time it seemed like everything was going great. I loved singing in bands. I still sing to this day, and the idea of fame and fortune was exciting, but there's a reason why so many famous people commit suicide, right? There's a reason why so many people have all what you and I would think they have everything. They're miserable, they're depressed, and I could go down the list of all these famous people over the years that ultimately were miserable. And I was in that place. So I was getting closer, but at the same time, it was just a deep, dark place in my life. And had a younger brother, and when he was 15, that committed suicide. He had a girlfriend that broke up with him, and he got upset about it, and so one thing led to another, and he shot himself. So that was something I was dealing with at the same frame in my life. And so even though I was really depressed and I became really suicidal, I saw what my parents had to go through with my younger brother, and I thought, well, there's just no way I can do this. That'd be the most selfish thing I could possibly do, is putting them through that again. So worked through it, and it was just a rough time. So I kept playing in bands, I kept doing things like that, and eventually I had to go, and I wasn't making a full-time income, so I did all kinds of crazy odd jobs, working construction, and I remember at one point I was making like $10 an hour pouring concrete, just sweating all day long, and I'm in these neighborhoods of these $500,000 homes, and I remember just thinking, is this all there is to life? Is this it? I'm almost getting close to being 30 at the time, and I'm like, I'm making $10 an hour. I had moved in the last band. A lot of times in the music industry, you get a lot of A-type personalities in the same room, and things don't always work out. So our drummer and our bass player just started not getting along, and so that was kind of the end of that band. And the funny thing about that band is that we had management out of Chicago, and we were offered to go on tour with Incubus at one time, but we turned it down because we thought we had some things in the works with Kid Rock and with Korn, and we thought we'd be playing with those guys. So we got to play with Seven Dust, we got to play with Mudvayne, we got to play with Taxi War Dance and a lot of the other incredible bands. But what I realized later is the thing that I was chasing then wasn't the real thing for me. And it took me a while to figure that out. So what happened for me then, I'll never forget. This was October 2001. I was literally sleeping on a friend's floor. Like, I'd gotten married. By then I'd gotten divorced. And I was just like, you just take everything. I had my backpack, and I was like 2 steps away from being homeless, right? And just tired of life, tired of the $9 and $10 an hour jobs. And so a friend of mine said, hey, I got a spare room. You can come sleep there. So I was literally living on the floor with a sleeping bag and a few clothes. And that's what I had at that point in my life. That was it.
You know, you've made it in the rock and roll lifestyle when you've moved into a buddy's room with a sleeping bag. You know, I mean, that's just the cream of the crop of living the rock and roll dream.
Yeah. The rock and roll dream. And I was like, man, my dream has turned into my nightmare. It was just bad. And I'd gone to college and got back a couple times, and I just kept dropping out. I was like, this just isn't, this really isn't for me, I don't think. So 2001, my sister, it was her birthday. She's 3 years younger than me, and she called me up, and she's like, hey, will you come out and meet me out for a drink? And I was driving this hoopty then too, man. I mean, this is one of those cars that you hide it around the corner. You really don't want anyone to know that you're driving it. A $1,200 Pontiac Bonneville those things will run forever though, man. Those things will go like 350,000 miles, no problem. So I have this Pontiac Bonneville. And so I drive out to go meet my sister because it's her birthday. And I'm like, okay, I got to go. And that was the day that she ran into an old boyfriend of hers that had moved from Illinois to California. And in California, he'd gotten involved in a business and brought this guy, his mentor, back with him. This guy's name was Josh Denny. And so I was there, and Josh had asked me about my life, and I was pretty much just telling him it sucked. I had no idea what I'm going to do when I grow up, kind of thing. And he's like, well, you should look into what we're doing. And he started sharing with me a business that he had launched in California. And it was funny because he had flown back with Ryan to help Ryan build his business in Illinois, and he had this long list of people to meet with, and my sister and myself hadn't even made the list. So sometimes I think it's just being at the right place at the right time. And that was what that was for me. So 2001, I ended up that weekend going to this weekend seminar, learning more about this business. And so I started getting into this. But what wasn't life-changing for me at that time wasn't just getting in that business. It was meeting a guy who believed in me and actually turned me on to a whole world of what he called personal development. And this idea that there were books out there were things that I could read that would change my mindset, that would open my mind up to new opportunities and new possibilities. And that is exactly what I needed at the time. So one of the first people he introduced me to was Jim Rohn.
Love Jim Rohn.
That dude, I love his stuff. He's just like, the way he says things, it's so simple. It's so easy. He says, don't wish things were easier, wish you were better. He started using these things like, what are all the problems in my life? Well, at that point, I thought the problems were all these things out there. These people won't pay me enough money. They won't do this. The problem was all out there. And what he helped me to understand was that I was the problem. And that if I would change, then everything would change for me. And that I could actually learn how to have a new set of eyes and a new perspective. And I could look out at the world and see things a lot differently. So that was the beginning of an exciting transitional time in my life, was just digging into this personal development. And today, behind me I've got, and that's just one bookshelf, but I have a lot, John Maxwell stuff all over the place. Jim Rohn, I'm taking our team right now through studying the life of John Wooden. I mean, John Wooden was a guy who was coach of the century. It's one thing to be coach of the year, but when you're coach of the century, and, you have great coaches of today, like the St. Louis Cardinals coach. He's one of the guys that's on this video series we're going through. But just spending their life studying John Wooden and understanding how amazing he is. So I just started to learn there's a lot of people out there that life sucked, and they figured out how to change it. And so I decided to start making those changes. And, a few years later, another huge thing that happened to me was I ran into my wife. And it was funny because by this point in time, this is about 2003, I was I'd been divorced. I was like, I don't want to ever get married again. That's not for me in my future. I'll be better off by myself, not take care of anyone else. Right. And I was with this little band. We were just doing cover shows to make some money and stuff called One Shot Twice. And we were doing this benefit for my drummer's son's best friend had died in a car accident. So there was going to be 6 bands at this benefit. And it's in the middle of nowhere. Hudson, Illinois, a place called the Sitting Bull. Think about probably 80-90% of people in there were missing teeth kind of place in the middle of nowhere.
Sounds
right?
like my hometown.
Well, it looks like you have all yours, so, you know.
Yeah, we're good. Well, you know, I lost 1 or 2 in the Marine Corps, but, you know, I digress.
So I was there, and, you know, we were just like, yeah, this is just another one of those Sunday afternoons where there's like 100 people in the place. I'm like, okay, we're here for a good cause. And then I just looked back, the door opened, and my wife walked in, and I'd never seen her. She's wearing a white dress, just didn't fit in. And I literally elbowed our guitar player, and I said, that's my future wife. And he said, no, man, that's my future wife. And I was like, we'll see about that, right? And so we, you know, I ended up meeting her, our band, she came there in time and our band played and she was from the St. Louis area. And I said, hey, give me your number. If we come play up that way, I'll get a hold of you so we can connect. And so I ended up getting in touch with her later that night. This was on a Sunday. We hung out that night. And then by Friday, we had moved in together. And 2 months later, she was pregnant. 8 months later, we were married. And so now it was like, okay, what are we going to do now? Bottom line is we knew we had a kid on the way. And by this time, I knew that she had some issues, right? And she knew I had some issues, and we're like, oh, we got to sort this out. So we started seeking out mentors. We started seeking out good people who had raised their children well and surrounding ourselves with those kind of people. And ultimately, it led me back into the military. So after an 11-year, and I know a lot of military guys are probably watching this, you guys will feel my pain. But so I got out of the military after 3 years as a specialist. And I was 21 when I got out. So here I am going back into the military at 30, and I've got to start back over as a PFC, right, at 30 years old. So I've literally, and now I've done some life, I've learned some things, I've got some life skills, and, you know, I've got these 20-year-olds barking orders at me and telling me what to do. So it's very humbling. It was a very humbling experience.
You're a better man than I, man, because there ain't no way in hell I could have done that.
It was rough. It was really rough. Those first couple years, so rough. Ended up at Bragg, and the 2 things I wanted when I went back in the military is I knew I wanted airborne school because I wanted to jump out of airplanes, and I knew I didn't want to get on the year on, year off deployments. I didn't want to have to deploy all the time as we started a family. So parachute rigger was the job that I tried airborne, and like I was with the 11th quartermaster at Bragg, and you have a unit of about 30 people, and it's 20 to 30 deploying at a time. It's usually all volunteers. So it was a great experience. And along the way, you know, I was going through the leadership course to become an NCO, a sergeant. And I had like 5 minutes to brief on the Army values, and I stood up and briefed. And then later that instructor pulled me to the side and he said, have you ever considered becoming an officer? Because you just briefed that like an officer. And I was like, I hadn't really thought about it, but the seed was planted. And it's so powerful. You know, there's power. I believe there's power of life and death in the tongue. And for all you parents out there, make sure you're speaking life into your kids, you know, what they're going to be able to do, and not that they're a piece of crap or you'll never amount to anything and those kinds of things, because that will literally, those words can literally destroy, I believe, your children. So just make sure 100%. You're life into them. And so this guy spoke life in me, planted a seed, and I thought, wow. First of all, when I met my wife, I had 6 warrants for my arrest. This is when I knew she loved me. We'd been together for about a week. We go into this bar, and someone had called, they knew or whatever, and they had called, and about 3 officers came in and arrested me because I had 6 warrants for my arrest. And all it basically was a bunch of my past, the rock and roll years. At one point, I lived downtown Bloomington, and it's like one of those, where you can park on this side of the street on Tuesdays and Thursdays between 2 and 4, and you can park on this side of the street Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And it was so confusing. I just parked right in front of my apartment every single day, and every single day I got parking tickets, and I just threw them in the glove box because I just was in a state of I don't care at that point. And they go from like $5 to like $10 to like $20. So I had $3,000 in parking tickets. So you end up with a warrant when you don't pay your parking tickets, right? And then when you get a ticket and you don't go to court, you end up with a warrant. So I just kept getting tickets for various things, and I just kept not going to court. So yeah, six warrants. Got to end up spending 2 weeks in jail as part of my.
And you guys were dating for a week at this time?
We're married.
Yeah, we were dating for a week when they came and got me. And
Wait, great.
Machine.
And so either she's as crazy as you are, because she stayed with you after that whole fact, or she's just a damn good woman. It's so that's awesome.
Well, I can tell you she's both. She's crazy and she's a damn good woman, because that's how our.
She's got no taste in men, man. I'm looking at you right now, and she must be blind.
I do have a radio face, but I have many other skills.
Oh, fair enough. You and me both.
So, it was the military. It was a wake up call getting there. But now I had focus and I had purpose, and I was there for a reason. I was there to promote as fast as possible, and so I ended up as a staff sergeant. But looking at going through officer candidate school, first I'd have to go revisit my past, because you have to get waivers for everything in the military.
Right.
The only reason I was able to get back in the military in 2005 with 6 warrants for my arrest and being prior service and all that is because that's the time when they were scraping the bottom of the barrels trying to find people to join.
Right.
So I went to the Marine and the Air Force and I asked around and they're like, no thanks, man. We don't want you. The Army's like, well, we guess we'll take you back. So I barely squeaked my way back in the military. And so now to look at, getting a secret clearance, becoming an officer, going through the board, answering all these questions again, describing, convincing people that I had changed and I wasn't the clown that I'd been those years ago when I collected the warrant. I've got some of the pictures of my warrants because, you run into those soldiers in the military who are on their way there. Right. You're like, you're either going to turn around or you're going to end up in jail. It's not going to go good for you. And look, here's what happened to me. So I would show them, and it helped a few of them turn around. But so I was able to and the other thing I had to do is go back to college. Because you have to have a degree.
Right.
I did not want to go back to college, but I found an online thing. I got all my credits combined, and I was able to just sit down on the weekends for 2 years, pretty much every weekend, and I finished my college degree, and I was able to go through. And so I go through all this. So finally in 2010, I'm commissioned. I'm an officer, and I'm an OE. When you're on the OE scale, your pay, I think it jumped over $1,000 just going from staff sergeant to second lieutenant. And then, you just show up and you promote to first lieutenant and then captain and so on. I mean, the military is one true place where if you stick and stay, you pretty much get your pay over time. As long as you just don't do something stupid, usually you'll get promoted. So went through all that, thought I was going to do 20 years. And I'm in, where was I at? Louisiana. I was at JRTC getting ready to deploy. And my sister, my wife had a friend that heard about these health and wellness products. Okay, and this is in, let me see what the time. Oh, we're going to go on time. So this was in 2012, summer of 2012. So if you guys have ever been to Fort Polk, Louisiana, I don't recommend it. I think it's probably a good representation of hell, Yeah,
so for guys who's listened to the show, picture Camp Lejeune, and that pretty much sums it up. It's a shithole.
Yeah, you go there in like June, July, man, people are just dropping. It doesn't matter how much you hydrate. You're out there in the sun, and people are just like, you all right, man? Like, yeah. So this craziness happened, and my wife just starts blowing up my phone with these. She's sending me these before and after pictures because she had a friend who has 9 children now, but at the time she had her 5th baby. And she was, like every woman, she's trying to figure out, hey, how can I get my old body back, my pre-pregnant body back, right? That's probably the first thing that starts going through the ladies' minds when the baby comes out. All right, oh, my gosh, look at the residuals here. What are we going to do with all this, right? So she was excited about it, talking to my wife about it. So my wife just starts sending me these pictures, and I'm like, what does she send? She sent me all kinds of body parts, stomachs, this one was the back of this lady's legs, and one of her legs looked all swollen, and the other one was a lot smaller, and I'm like, man, I see what they do. They wrap one leg, and then you either buy the other one or you just have a hobble for the rest of your life. This is a pretty cool deal. But she was excited about it, and I was like, sure, let's become customers or whatever. So she waited for me to come home from the training, and I put this product on her, and it worked. And then I started finding out about other products, and one of my favorites it's called Greens, and it's literally 52 superfoods. If you think of juicing, it's just an easy, more affordable way to juice. And so I started using that, and that got me off the energy drinks, the Red Bulls, the Monsters, that kind of stuff. I started drinking this green powder that I mix with water or juice, and it's given me 8+ servings of fruits and vegetables, and I'm not a big fruits and vegetables guy, so I'm like, okay, this is cool. So basically this company, we got involved with it, and we started just sharing the products with people. And we built a team, and now we've got an international team. We can do business in 23 countries. We're in our team is in every single state, I think in probably about 9 of the 23 countries. And it's just turned into this huge deal. So within 8 months doing this part-time on the evenings and weekends, we had quadrupled my Army officer pay. So I was like, well, I guess I could walk away from the military and do this full-time. So February 2014, I hung up my boots and got out of the military, and I've been working from home with my wife since, and we've got a big, huge, thriving organization, and it's allowed me to get into other things. And so I'm just finished up my first book. Here's the first book plug. Finding Happy. 10 Keys to Living an Extraordinary Life. And, today I just went into a little bit of the details, but it just goes into some, because when I look at the past 15, 20 years for me, I went from a place when I was in my early to mid 20s of just a really dark place, really dark depression, very suicidal, possibly would have committed suicide if my brother hadn't already done it. And to go through that part and feeling like my life was over in my mid-20s to now just being so excited. Now we have 3 children, great marriage, very successful business organization. I'm able to train and mentor other guys and just do a lot of things to help give back. And it's completely changed. So I guess if the message, if I'm leaving a message with any of you, is that what I've learned through my life and my 45 years almost is that anybody can turn it all around. Like, it takes maybe 3 to 5 years, and you can go from 0 to the top.
Well, let's talk about that a second, because a lot of people hear that, right? And, I have a lot of guests that have come on the show that have that kind of similar story where they went through the shit, they went through the tough times, they went through the dark areas, they've come out on the other end, and now they're seeing a level of success as they define it, because only the individual can define success for themselves, right? So they're seeing the level of success that they never thought they would get to. But when most people hear that story, they're like, well, that's that guy's story. That's that gal's story. That's not my story. How did you keep all your mental game in check to be able to survive this long, to find this success? I mean, because there's got to be times when you're stacked up against it going, am I doing the right thing? Am I making the right life choices? Where does that gumption come through to keep pushing forward?
I'll give it to you ultimately, because this is, I think, is one of the things that was really so life-changing for me. Is there's a really good book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey.
Yep.
And one of the habits is begin with the end in mind. And there's actually an exercise that he says to do. So, if you're listening to this, you can just do it right now. So just close your eyes and picture that I'm sure everyone here has probably attended someone's funeral before. So you're at a funeral, right? You're there and you see the room is just packed. And you look around and you see all your best friends. You see your children. You see your spouse. You see coworkers, all the people in your life that have mattered to you. And you go up to the front, and there you are. Right? Maybe this is 50 years from now, right? That's you. You're in the casket. This is your funeral. So imagine now you're able to stand in the back of the room at your funeral. And imagine your kids go up there. And what would you like them to say about you? What would you like your wife to say about you? What would you like your parents to say about you, your siblings to say about you, your friends, your family? What will they say about you? What will they say you stood for? What will they say you did with your life? What will they say you spent your time and that your focus and the things that you worked on in your life were? And when you know that, when you know how you want it to look then, now you have something to work toward, because you can be very intentional. It's just being intentional about living. I mean, most people do is they kind of drift. We look for the path of least, spend most of our time tension relieving and goal achieving. The truth is that most people spend more time in their 2-week vacation every year than they do planning their life, right? So when you start thinking about things that truly, truly matter, I mean, every night, 7 to 11 is called prime time, because that's when the majority of the world is checked out on the couch, which I call tension relieving. It's just tension relieving instead of goal achieving. So people think, like, I remember back in the day, I was when I was first in the military, I was so intimidated, I thought I could never be an officer. They're so smart. They know so much more than me, man. They got a college degree. I'll tell you what, when I went to officer candidate school, we were doing land nav, and they're like giving us the boundaries, and 3 guys headed across the street the wrong direction. They said that was the boundary. Don't go that way. So the morning I woke up, and, I was the class leader, and I look at the guy, and he's got his brown T-shirt on inside out and backwards with the tag hanging right here. Hey, brother, you got dressed in the dark, didn't you? He's like, yeah, man. Why? I'm like, dude, you need to go in the bathroom and change your shirt. I'm like, come on, man. It's not in our minds. Success is this big thing that's not obtainable. But what is it really? It's simple disciplines practiced over time. That's all it is.
I love that. Simple disciplines practiced over time. But, as people are going through it, they get stacked up against it, right? And they can picture it, the visual, Stephen Covey's process, the funeral. They can say, okay, this is what I want them to say. This is what I want them to do. This is that life I want to create. But there is that gap between the person they want to become and who they are beyond the simple disciplines, because it's tough doing those disciplines. I mean, people will get out there and they're trying to do the right thing on a regular basis and stay consistent and do the right thing. But that 8 to 5 pays the bills, the 7 to 3, builds a legacy. How do they keep those disciplines going? I mean, how do they keep pushing? How do they keep the fight in the game?
I think the most important thing, honestly, for me is having a strong why and having strong reasons, because every day there's a battle. There's a battle between your excuses to not do something or your reasons to do it. So you got to make sure you're making those reasons strong enough. You got to make sure you're making your why. And what I mean by why is just something that you can attach some strong emotions to, why you need to do this. Like I hear all the time that some of the healthiest people in the world are those ones that survive their first heart attack. And it's because why just got real big. Hey, if I don't change my ways, I'm going to die. Right? And so that's so important. So I think it just boils down to like Jim Rohn. I'll go back to Jim Rohn. I love Jim Rohn's story because he'd been working, for 6 years, and he had no savings. He had no money. He had hardly nothing. And here was his defining day. A Girl Scout came and knocked on his door, and she was trying to sell Girl Scout cookies, and she was so cute, and he loved her presentation, and he wanted to buy, but he didn't have $2 to buy the cookies. And he was so embarrassed by not having $2 to buy the cookies so instead he lied to her, and he said, I've still got some Girl Scout cookies, in the house here, and but thank you, you did a great job and all that. And when she left, he had that defining moment. Something clicked for him where he said, I cannot live like this anymore. And it was just that never again moment. I cannot live like this anymore. So, and I'll give you a quick story for me. So I love the military. I love serving. But there's a couple things for me, this is just for me, that happened in the military that caused me to start considering, because up until this point, I just was going to do 20 years. That was just my plan. It was my goal. I had gotten to the point where I knew if I just continued to show up, I'd get out as a lieutenant colonel, probably, maybe if I stayed longer, colonel, whatever. But 3 things happened to me. And these 3 things were my fuel. And I think that when I talk about why, when I talk about reasons, it's like your fuel. You got to have something because, when you wake up in the morning, you're not going to feel like doing the things that you need to do to get to where you need to go. So you got to have more than feelings to get you there. So 3 things happened for me. And the first one was that I had a good buddy that I went through officer candidate school with. And when I say good buddy, this guy was like all American. He was a West Point football player, friends with everyone, just that guy. He had just gotten married. He was in Afghanistan 3 days, hit an IED, killed him. And I'm just like, because when you're in the military, you don't think that's going to happen to you, right? You think, I'm invincible. Man, these other guys might die and they're going to die, but hey, I'm a superhero. It's not going to happen to me. You go through where you have to have your will filled out and you're not even really thinking about it. You're like, who cares about that? This isn't going to happen to me. I'm safe. And I was a field artillery guy, so I kind of thought, I'm not infantry. I'm combat arms, but I'm not infantry. I'm safe. Well, my buddy goes over there and I'm like, if anybody is safe, it should have been him. And he's killed. So I'm thinking, okay, now for the first time, what does this look like for my family if something happens to me? So I had to seriously consider that. That was the first thing. The second thing was 2 weeks before deployment, I had this amazing vacation planned with my little kids, my family. We were going to go to Disney. Had it all planned out. Everything was set, tickets bought. And about 10 days before the vacation, they said, we have some add-on deployment pre-deployment training. We're going to have to cancel everybody's vacation time, and we have to do it on the other end when we get back. And I'm like, really? And so it wasn't such a big deal because I understand when you're in the military, the Army basically owns you, right? You're a soldier 24/7. You know that when you sign up. Your spouse, your family knows they get the leftovers, and that's just the way it is because we're training for war, and you have to do what you got to do. But when I sat down and looked at my daughter, and she didn't understand, and my word was on the line, and basically what am I to my daughter when I say we're going on vacation, we're counting down the days from like 2 months out, right? And I'm like, hey, we can't go. We're going to have to wait another year. And she's like, Daddy, but you said, and I'm like, okay. So at that point, I realized that I didn't own my own time. And how long was I going to be okay with that? So now I'm in Afghanistan, 7,300 miles from home. And my youngest son, who was 2 at the time, from when he was born, he was, just really sickly and had a hard time. Like he was crawling really late and wasn't walking yet, until he was almost 2. And so he ended up with croup, and he was on breathing treatments. And I knew all this because, once in a while you can get on Wi-Fi when you're in Afghanistan or whatever. So I knew all this, and I was traveling because I had a group of 6 guys, and we had to travel to different locations and train the Afghan Army how to shoot their artillery because they had no clue. They didn't know how to read a map or anything. We found we're like, hey, here's where you are right here. You want to shoot that mountain? Because normally they would just point their stuff in a direction and just start firing and adjust, and they had no idea how to plan it out and had to do a fire mission or whatever. So we're there, and I'm flying back through. I'm in Bagram, getting ready to fly back to Joyce, where we were basically stationed at. And I get online, and my wife's like, please pray for us. I'm on my way to the emergency room. My son's has an internal hemorrhaging happening, and the blood, they have to do emergency surgery because they can't keep the blood in him as fast as it's going out of him. I'm like, that's a crappy message to see on Facebook, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So, I'm in an airport. So obviously, like any father, I'm like, hey, I got a great platoon sergeant with me. I can hand him the stuff and you got this, they'd probably be happier for me to leave anyway, right? Having
get the officer on the way. Yep.
So I'm like, I'm making the phone calls. I'm like, okay, got Red Cross. They send the message down. Hey, we need this dad home right now. I'm like, boom, 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 got it all together. And at the end of the day, we're sorry, sir. You got to fly back here. You got to turn in your weapon. You can't just sign it over to your platoon sergeant. You got to come turn it in, and we need you to actually fill some paperwork out. And so I had to fly the wrong direction, 12 hours, have a 24-hour layover to fly back to where I started. And so the whole way home, I'm just thinking about this stuff, and I'm like, is this really worth it? Do I want to do this for 10 years, 10 more years? Do I want to be owned by the military and not truly have time freedom? And so that's when this business fell in our lap. So whenever we went to this conference in January, because I came back, the cool thing was I got home on Christmas Eve, and the kids had no idea. So when I got home on emergency leave, and then I was able to stay, they needed a rear D commander, so I stayed, and I was a rear D commander. So this meant in January I went to this big convention. And all I did was, and kind of like what you're asking earlier, I met people who'd already done what I was thinking about doing. And I saw they were human. I saw they were just normal people. I saw that they didn't have any great super skill set that I couldn't figure out. And so my wife and I decided right then and there that for the next 100 days, we were going to work our butts off. And in that 100 days, we literally we went from making a couple $1,000s a month with our stay-at-home business to making 4 times the amount that I was as an officer, and I was able to I had to turn in a packet. It took 6 months to get out of the military, but I was able to get out. And so when I say that, and ideas are great, intentions are great, New Year's resolutions are great, but let's be real, 80+% of people don't lose the 20 pounds. They lose the 5 in the first couple of weeks, and then they go, I feel like eating here, and I don't feel like working out. And so they kind of revert back to form, and they go back to that. So what's the difference between the ones who lose the 20 and the ones that don't lose the 20? Well, it's just more important to them. I mean, the bottom line is that they have a strong why. They develop some strong emotional attachment to that. Accountability, I think, is huge. I mean, it's hard for a lot of people. It's harder to blow off a friend that you're meeting at the gym, or to pay a personal trainer, right? Pay a personal trainer that you're going to pay anyway, and then not show up. It causes you to, when you don't feel like it, and you got to kind of trump your feelings. I heard one time to let your feelings in the car, but never let your feelings in the driver's seat, because when you let your feelings in the driver's seat, nothing good ever comes from that.
Well, let me ask, because I've been asked by listeners in the past when I hear these awesome stories, dude, and thank you for sharing it in detail like that, is some of my listeners have reached out to me and they're like, okay, do I have to hit rock bottom? Do I have to have this life catastrophe happen? Do I have to get, just something traumatic in my life to happen to find my why? Because they're like, I'm looking for it. I'm staring for it. I'm constantly thinking of what's motivating me, and I can't find it. So everybody who's hit it is hit some sort of rock bottom. What would you tell somebody as they're going up against it and there's no big catastrophe, they haven't had the heart attack or anything else? How do they find their why? I mean, how do they find what they're looking for?
Well, I think part of it is, here's a simple test. Do you feel the same on a Monday as you do on a Friday?
I love that.
No. Okay. And I'll agree with you that most of the world is in the same boat. I mean, the heart attack rate is higher on a Monday than any other day of the week. And when you have like the daylight savings time, it even jumps up even higher because people are so much more stressed out because they're waking up an hour earlier. More people have heart attacks. Like, to me, it's crazy, but I live that life, and there's songs. Everybody's working for the weekend, right? Probably heard that song. And so we have Wednesday, hump day. I mean, there's restaurants, TGIF. Thank God it's Friday. We can finally enjoy our life for Friday, Saturday, at least 2 days. There's this mentality that it's just normal to endure your life most of the time and enjoy your life a little bit of the time. Well, if you buy into that, you're buying into that. I don't know who says to not get your hopes up, because I think that's just one of the stupidest things. Or what you don't know won't hurt you, because what you don't know could be the very reason that you're not successful right now, is because of that. So you have to, you have to, first of all, just take a real moment and look in the mirror and say, am I reaching my full potential? Am I doing something to get to my full potential? Mark Twain has a great quote. He says, the two best days in a man's life are the day he's born and the day he figures out why.
Why? Yeah.
Because when you figure that out and when you work in that space, a lot of people call it a hobby, but you can figure out a way to make your hobby your full-time deal. It just takes some planning, it takes some purpose, and you just spend time on it, just like you do planning your 2-week vacation. You and your wife sit down and you go, okay, we're going to go here. So to go from here where we are now to there, we got to have a plan. We're going to stay in a hotel one night. Okay, we better get a reservation or know approximately where. We got to save some money because we're going to go here, we're going to be eating out, we're going to spend money. So we think. So I guess the biggest thing is, where do you want to go? You got to kind of start with the end in mind, right? None of you would go build a house and just say, I'm going to go build a house. Let's go to Lowe's and buy some bricks, and we're just going to start building some bricks. Now, you got a blueprint. You have to have a blueprint. You have the blueprint first, and it's no different than with your life. So for me, when I'm talking to people, it's just, first you have to recognize that you're not happy where you're at, and that you're not reaching your full potential. And then you got to have a plan. And then you got to have some things to celebrate along the way when you're moving forward towards your plan. So anybody can do it. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people have to hit rock bottom before they finally make a drastic switch, because a lot of people are just kind of in that, it's okay. It's okay. And maybe they complain. I wish this and I wish that and I wish that. But are you willing to do something about it? And so just, I guess, first of all, knowing that you can make choices and that you can change. And that if you will change, then everything will change for you. And that's the key that I really try. And I hit that 4 or 5 times in the book, is because I had to realize that. I had to stop blaming. And again, what's normal in this world is to blame everything else out there for everything the wrong that's happening in our world. But the day you take responsibility and you say, okay, I'm in control of where I'm at right now, and I'm where I'm at right now because of the choices I've made. If you're at 400 pounds right now, you're there because of the choices you made. Nobody made you eat the unhealthy food, right, and kept you from eating the healthy food. You chose those. You made those choices. So what's so empowering is that you can make new choices. You can make new choices to get to a new place. And I think for my wife and I, for us, it was just a string of wake-up. It was a string of wake-up calls. It was, hey, we've got a kid. We want to give our kid the best possible future. So let's get around. We want to know what it looks like to be successful in raising kids. And now I've surrounded myself, and I have friends that are great husbands. And so when I'm being a jerk, my wife tells me I'm being a jerk. Instead of just going, I'm not being a jerk, I call him up and say, hey, she says I'm being a jerk. How could I be better? How can I change? how can all this change? So how can I? So Jim Rohn, again, just to go back.
I was going to even throw another, because that's one of Jim Rohn's greatest things of all time is, you become your 5 closest influences. I mean, who you surround yourself with is absolutely who you're becoming. Right. So if you're sitting around and you're, bring it back on you, living the rock and roll lifestyle, and everybody's into booze and drugs and everything else, that's the lifestyle you live. If you're sitting around people that are just moving through life like zombies, that's the life you're going to live. You want to crush it, and put Gary V's terminology out there. If you want to go for it, you want to create that life for you, you've got to start surrounding yourself around people that are living that life, are going for it, and are upping their game, because their influence will roll over to you. And Jim Rohn's the guy who coined all of that thought process. I'm with you, dude. I can talk about Jim for days, but
That's so good. And it's just incredible how much we can change, because I look back now and, I was so, again, like I shared earlier, I was so intimidated. There's no way I could become an officer. There's no way I could become a business owner. There's no way I could be in this group of people or do this group of people. The other day, I just confirmed every year for the last 4 years, I've been doing a men's retreat every year in Bonne Terre, Missouri, and mostly for guys that are in the business that I'm in. But I just confirmed, and sometimes it's like, it seems wild. Like, I was at a conference, a men's conference in April, 8,000 people there. There were 3 of the Philadelphia Eagle players there. There was Matt Hughes was there, right? You guys probably know, UFC fighter, 9-time UFC champ, Matt Hughes, right? Hit by a train last year, survived it, right? I mean, not too many people survive that, but so I saw him there, and I had a thought, man, I want to get Matt Hughes to our men's retreat. And our retreat's like 250 people. And I was like, he's never met me. He doesn't know me. I know of him. We're pretty much the same age. My buddy wrestled him in high school, but he doesn't know me. And I could have just been like, I'm not going to try that. But I said, I'm going to do what I can do and see if I can get him there. And I just confirmed yesterday, Matt's going to be one of the speakers at our men's retreat. And I never even got to talk to Matt. I ended up buying his book called Made in America, and I read about this guy in the book named Brian who influenced Matt and his brother Mark to go on a missions trip to Mexico. And I found out how to get in touch with Brian, started talking with Brian about Matt. And he said, well, let me just invite Matt. We'll get Matt there. So I sent Matt letters. I tried to send him emails. You know what I got from Matt? It was funny, too, because my wife's like, we got something from Matt in the mail. Here's what I got.
Signed picture. I
was trying to talk to him about coming and talking to our ministry. I got a signed picture. The thing is, you can make a way, you can make excuses, right? And again, every day when you wake up, it's like, hey, you're gonna pick that shirt out of the closet that's faith. You're gonna pick that shirt out of the closet that's fear. Are you gonna choose your excuses today, or are you gonna choose the reasons that you need to make the changes? And we all got 24/7.
I think just hearing your story, and it's a great story, one of the things that would be very powerful for your people, my listeners, is to show the progression of your life in pictures. I mean, I think you need to go back and show the bands that you played in and what you look like in that lifestyle. I think you show, what it looked like when you started out in the military, the transgression all the way through to where you are now, so people can actually see the visual side of your life. I think it'd be one hell of a story to put out there as well, too. So, because there's a lot of people that are in different stages of their life, whether they're in that rock and roll lifestyle, or like when I was a bartender and partying with the rock and rollers, to, my times in and out of the military, my times, in corporate America, all of those spots tell a story, and people are so visual that they can finally relate and say, okay, he really did go from the gutter of living on somebody else's floor to the level you're at now. They can see it and be right alongside of it. I think it'd be very.
I've been working on that, and it's funny because I finally found this. I had lost this, but somebody actually put it on YouTube, and we did this in Chicago. We did this 30-minute live video shoot. And so our big thing back when the band was called I Torture I. So you can literally go on YouTube and you can look up I Torture I, Rock My Ass Productions, and you can watch this 30-minute thing. But I thought it was lost, but somebody put it on YouTube. But we would start off shows. So I'm in my orange prison uniform, right? And we start off the shows. We built our own electric chair. This thing looks like a real electric chair. And, I've got like a face paint on and stuff, you can just tell I look all strung out, stressed out. Most of the time I was anyway. But I get electrocuted at the beginning of the show, and literally you hear the heartbeat and it stops. And they come out and start playing the music, and the music wakes me up, and hey, right? And so that's going to I'm going to have that in there. I'm going to have some of those mug shots in there, and probably break to just talking to the camera, and then, about the transitional time, and just really the awareness. Because it starts with us being aware and wanting to change, right? A lot of people just complain, but they don't really they're not there yet where they want to change. And that's why I think sometimes it takes, guy to be divorced 3 or 4 times before they finally go, maybe, I wonder if I'm the problem.
Right.
And they've been divorced 3 times, and they're like, man, I just can't find the right woman. And I'm like, well, maybe you're just not the right guy.
There's a common denominator there, buddy. So that's awesome. Well, Chad, I got to tell you, dude, it's been awesome having you on the show, man. Seriously, thank you for sharing your story with us. Where can people find the book, Finding Happy?
So you can go to www.findinghappybook.com, and I just got that site finished yesterday, and I don't think the pre-order button's working yet, but it will be in the next few days because I actually have copies on the way. You can also go on Amazon. The book's available there. It's for pre-order now, and Barnes & Nobles, and so it's going to be out all over the place soon. So thank you so much, Donnie, for inviting me on here, and just appreciate, man, all that you do and hearing some of the stories that you're getting out there to everybody. And I think it's a great thing, man. So appreciate
Thanks, brother. I appreciate that. So here's how I like to wrap up every show. And just so you know, I throw some people for a curveball when I ask this question, so be prepared for that. But if you were going to leave my guest with a phrase, a slogan, a motto, a mantra, something they can carry with them as they're going on their journey, especially at those times when they're stacked up against it, trying to figure out, how do I keep going? How do I keep pushing? What would be that phrase, mantra, or saying you would say, pull this out of your toolkit and use?
Well, honestly, I would just go back to if you will change, everything will change for you.
Beautiful. Love it, brother. Love it. Dude, thanks a lot for being on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
All right, man. Have a good one.
Wow, that was just an awesome episode. What a freaking journey. Man, when you hear stuff like that, you just get goosebumps on the ride. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode. Please do me a favor, comment on it. Let this person know how much you value their story, their information. Please share this with your friends. It would mean everything to me.